Just a few more seconds here.
All right.
Okay, we're set.
Okay, this is the Housing Advisory Commission for the City of Oxford, Monday, May 18th, 2020 meeting. Call to order. Let's call this meeting to order. First agenda item, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, good. All right. Any additions or corrections? I would like to add an old business item to the agenda because there are things from our last meeting that I think we need to hook up with again to make sure that the requests were completed. So do we have do I have to ask for approval again? I mean, for motion?
I think you could make a motion to include an additional agenda item.
Okay, any discussion about that before I make the motion? Okay, let's make a motion to include an additional agenda item of old business. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll do that and we'll hit that later. Okay, now we're gonna move down. We're moving down to item number 3, approval of the April 2020 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I'd like to make a correction to the April 20 minutes. I noticed last month when we approved the March 2020 minutes and didn't say anything, but I now noticed it again on the April 2020 minutes that when it comes to the roll call, my vote has not been counted. So can I ask for changes to the March and April minutes to adjust for my name to be added to the roll call? It was, in all cases, I was voting with the majority, so that should be an easy fix. So can I have a motion for approval of the April 2020 meeting minutes as adjusted?
Sam, Zach, is it appropriate or was that a miss concerning the chair's vote being recorded?
It was just an accident.
Okay.
It was not intentional to leave off the chair's vote.
I move that correction be made, please.
Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Jason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Scott, did you vote? We didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Muted.
Opposed? Okay, that is passed. Now we move on to item number 4, presentation on housing incentives by Shauna.
Okay. And I apparently should have printed this out at a bigger font. So when I do this a lot, that's what's happening. I'm like, so one of our goals for 2020 was to investigate inclusionary housing policies like incentives to developers, being the one that I'm going to talk the most about now, but also set-asides and in lieu fees. And that's something that has been brought up in the last couple of years quite a bit, but without a lot of movement towards having anything done. So my hope here is to present this information as possibilities of what we can do as a city to encourage developers. But I'll get to the end of that. So there's a whole bunch of incentives that can be offered to developers. So I'll go through those. Increased density, parking or design waivers, zoning variances, tax abatements, fee waivers, expedited permitting, cash payments. And then another one that wasn't on the first website I looked at, but was in a couple others that I thought should be added, city-owned property, where it can be leased or sold at a low interest rate. So sometimes incentives are considered to be giveaways to developers, particularly when it's in a voluntary housing program where it's not mandated that affordable housing be built. And I could see where people in Oxford who have been working for a while to add inclusionary housing policies to what we do, like Age-Friendly Oxford, for instance. I could see where some of them would think that if we did just a voluntary only type, just incentives for that would be voluntarily given to people who did affordable housing, they might be upset if we didn't put in things like requirements for set-asides for affordable housing or in lieu fees instead of doing those set-asides. So that might be a problem as far as other individuals in the community or groups in the community that might not like it without being mandatory. So one thing I did find was these incentives are usually part of a toolkit for inclusionary housing policies that include set-asides and in lieu fees. As an example, I found that in Montgomery County in Maryland, this is for like specific numbers here, there's already a requirement that developers provide 12.5% affordable units in new developments. But if they want to take advantage of a density bonus by building 15% or more affordable housing units, they receive a density bonus of up to 20%. Now, one caveat that I saw over and over again is before any incentives are provided to developers, that a city should do a feasibility study to see if the the economic costs of providing those incentives to the developers are actually worth it for the particular community. So I don't know if, I know we're going to get into the housing study later today, but, it might be good to know how feasible these economic incentives would be. Okay, so increased density is by far the most popular incentive for developers. Like 80% or something of all inclusionary housing programs include an increased density bonus. So typically programs allow increases of between 10 and 20% over the baseline in exchange for the provision of affordable housing. But a lot of evidence shows that density bonuses alone don't encourage affordable housing units to be developed. Partly that's because we're looking at large cities where these policies are in place. What happens is developers are offered the density bonus, but in these large cities where high rises are being built, they don't actually want to take advantage of those density bonuses because of the cost of construction. Because when you're talking about like a 100 unit development or larger, those construction costs can go up quite a bit. Now, I'm not sure if in Oxford, when we're talking about a 3 versus 4 story building, if that really would come into play with construction costs. I'm not a developer, but that is a possibility for that kind of incentive. And another issue with increased density, which I've actually seen in Oxford, it could reduce public support for new projects if they believe it will adversely affect their neighborhoods. And a couple of examples just from the last 2 to 3 years. We've got the proposed Elm Street development where the developer wanted the zoning to be increased to R3 so that it could be a pretty dense project. And there was a lot of outcry about a development that large being in that specific location. And then another thing that we saw recently-ish was the development between Indian Trace and Spartan Drive, where that kind of dense development had a lot of outcry, especially from the Spartan Drive neighborhood. And that seemed to be enough to scare off the developer. So, you know, even when you do offer these to developers, these kinds of incentives for a density bonus, you might see neighborhoods in Oxford that don't want to see that next to them. And also I had a question for Sam or Zach, because this had come up before. When you're talking about being within the city limits, I don't know if the charter prevents any kind of density bonus above what's already allowed. So that was something that I just wasn't sure would be an issue or not. So just for an example, in Bloomington, Indiana, the density bonus is given to developers that pay an in lieu fee. And that's totally voluntary. This isn't that they have to build affordable units or pay an in lieu fee. It's that they can get the increased bonus either by building affordable housing or paying an in lieu fee that then goes to a housing development fund. And then that housing development fund in Bloomington provides money for specific projects that will help with affordable or workplace housing. For instance, one specific development that I saw was to provide workforce housing in downtown Bloomington by using fees. So another one, expedited processing. So that can move projects with an affordable component to the front of the line as far as like permits and getting that processed. So I'm not sure how that would look in Oxford. It feels like, to me, I don't see what Sam and Zach see when developers first approach the city, but I have not seen personally a lot of developments come before Planning Commission. So I'm not sure if the expedited processing of permits really will help, because basically everything is at the front of the line right now. I mean, Zach and Sam can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But it just, I don't know if expedited processing would even matter here in Oxford at this point in time. Fee waivers are another incentive that can be provided. So that could be planning fees, permitting fees, impact fees. And while this can be an easy way to give incentives to developers, it does also affect the revenue that a city gets. And right now, I'm not really sure what that looks like from a budget standpoint. So I don't know if that's a realistic incentive that can be offered. Because once again, a lot of the stuff I read was for large cities. So a parking requirement reduction. That one was actually really interesting. Columbus, Ohio, by the way, has started to really work on a very dedicated affordable housing policy. And they found that in certain neighborhoods where affordable housing would be really good, that the example was given that 2 parking spaces per unit are required, in the code, but that in locations with plenty of off-street or on-street parking, as well as with lower income individuals, they don't have as many cars. That was an easy thing that they could do to provide incentives, was that less parking had to be built. Tax abatement, which generally refers to property taxes. So in some places, owners are given reduced or removed property taxes per year, so they don't have to pay those or not pay as much. Once again, I don't know how that relates exactly to Oxford. I mean, I know our property taxes help fund Talawanda schools, so I'm not sure that, I would want to see any tax abatements. As much as affordable housing is really important, I also don't want to see the Talawanda School District suffer. So that, once again, would be something maybe that a feasibility study could determine. So, all right. And then I was talking about city-owned property earlier as my last little bullet point. And we own a lot of property. So I don't know if anybody's, I don't know where we are with the 732 property. Maybe that's going to be one of our updates. But since the city does own that land, it is possible for it to be leased or for it to be sold with a lower interest rate than usual. So, and then as far as developing a coordinated inclusionary housing policy, I felt that it would require the following, and I'm opening this up to all of you as far as other things that you see need to happen. Data about the feasibility of economic incentives to developers and how it will affect Oxford's revenue and infrastructure usage. Staff time to help develop and bring the resulting proposed policy changes to appropriate commissions and city council. And then buy-in from local and other developers so they take part. Even if it's entirely voluntary, there could be reasons, like I said, with construction costs where developers would rather not build affordable housing units. So just wanted to present all that information from what I've read. A lot of it is kind of a repeat of some things that we've talked about in the past, but I feel good about bringing it all together in these notes and what I've talked to you about. So there's probably other things that we need to do to develop, even if it's just voluntary incentives. So I am opening this all to you guys.
So any comments? Glenn, I know that you've raised points in the past. Did she cover things that you were primarily interested in, or do you have some more ideas?
Yeah, Shauna's report was very comprehensive. I guess you would say, goal in presenting this a while ago was very similar to the Bloomington, Indiana model that you talked about, where community development figures out what they want to, I guess you would say, incentivize with input from us and perhaps planning and some other areas. But I would always want to have appended to that the ability for a developer to just pay a certain dollar amount that can go into a fund that would allow the city to discretionarily do stuff with it. Because that would address a lot of the issues that were talked about regarding like public sentiment for various projects, as well as, if we had something in this fund and we initiated a project, we can say this project was initiated from funds from, developments that chose to take some in lieu of fees for various kinds of bonuses. So when people start to protest, we can say, they paid this money is going towards this thing that you're protesting about. Shut up.
So you would want a dedicated line item?
I don't know what you mean by dedicated line.
Well, within the city budget, that's where that money would go into your fund would be a dedicated line item in the city budget.
Right. So we had that discussion back when the current housing fund went towards city council, and then it came back and it just said, the way that the current fund is structured doesn't lend itself to agility, and it's perhaps better to create a different fund or change the way that fund works. I don't understand all those specifics, but Sam spoke very eloquently about it the last time. And I'm sure that if we get to that point, then he could take care of that.
I had a quick question. You talked about how everybody says, I don't want this in my backyard. You have all kinds of pushback about, don't put it here. Maybe it's a great idea, but I don't want it here. among all of us, and Oxford owns all this property, what does Oxford own that we would not get pushback from? Anybody know?
Sam?
Well, I think the 732 property is just because of the size, you can build in the buffering there and do it in a master planned kind of way. So that would be the obvious first one to go to, Scott, would be to plan that one out. The other properties that we own are smaller pieces here and there. We've got a couple of parcels other places, but they wouldn't be big enough to really do what I would consider a project where you would have different types of dwelling units, multiple dwelling units.
Well, I think you and I talked about this. I think, God, I'm probably wrong. Oxford owns some land off of Bonham Road, down where the fields are, the fields to the left.
Yeah, that's a little too close to the floodplain for anything really serious to happen down there.
Okay, my question was, I mean, it's to incentivize somebody. Yes, it would be a little bit more expensive, but could you not elevate your footprint off the ground, just like they do on all coastal towns, where your structure doesn't even start until it's 10 feet off the ground? They could have under the building parking. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a possible place to put it that would have low impact on all the neighbors. It's close to town. I don't know.
It's worth discussion. It wouldn't be my first choice, but it's a good idea to throw in the hopper.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out if other than the obvious 732, is there any other place that we'd actually get a developer saying, I can work with that. I can come up with something to make that happen.
Was it the architecture department, Sam, last year that presented that the plan that won the award at National?
Oh, by Marshall? Are you talking about the yeah.
Maybe that could be, a plan for them to work on 2020, 2021 classroom time would be to develop something that would be raised for that spot. Because what they did was excellent, and if somebody wanted to develop it, it would really work very well here.
Isn't it like 11 acres down there? That's a pretty sizable chunk.
I'd like to go back to Glenn's comment and idea. Conceptually, I like it a lot, but I'm still concerned, like Shauna, you talked about how few developments there were, that almost everything is at the front of the line. So would we see much opportunity to gain money for the fund? And would the fund ever have enough in it that it could be useful to us to achieve what we're really after? So
I'd like to address that question. I am well aware of some redevelopment projects, and a lot of those redevelopment projects are multi-unit, and multi-unit routinely runs into density issues. Not too long ago, on the north side of town, near it was north of Sycamore, there was an individual that was looking into buying some property, consolidating it, and doing a project out there, but ran into density issues. I know that we have over near where 45 East is, there's a project there, and there's density issues. And, down that street, people want to redevelop that stuff, pack apartments into it, but then run into density things as far as doing their cost analysis. Like we need to have this many apartments in there, but it runs afoul of the current density that structure supports in our code. And that could be one of those situations where they go, well, we have these options here. You could make X amount of these things affordable for X amount of time, or you can pay this fee for it. And then, that fee being somewhat sizable because we could do some sort of fiscal analysis. I'm pretty sure that the minimum semesterly charge for one individual renting an uptown office is $5,000, or uptown apartment is $5,000. So $5,000 a person, and you multiply that out over, let's say, 10 years, and then you subtract out the affordable dollar amount that they would pay over that same 10 years ago. This is how much you need to pay to get that bonus, so that it basically breaks even for you. And when you're doing planning regarding those kinds of projects, it's way easier to sell to your investors that a line item that says fees is this large number versus saying, yeah, we have to build this apartment that can't be more than $550 a month. Like, they might not want to see that, but if they can see that it can be any pricing that they want, but it's going to have this upfront cost, and it can be built into some sort of loan or financing or note or something like that, where the real estate trust amortizes it, then they can get a go ahead from their financing.
Okay, thank
Just
you.
to summarize, like, super quickly, you would like to see the incentive of a density bonus be able to be bought.
That is correct. Now, what I'm also going to say along with that is the price of it being bought, like the Bloomington thing, be more expensive than the differential between what they were going to sell their stuff for based on comps, different kinds of comps in that area, minus the money that it would let me try to rephrase this better, but basically what they would get if it was a regular unit minus what they would get if it was an affordable unit, and then plus 10, like multiply that by 10%, so like times 1.1, and then just say this is how much this fee is going to cost you for that unit.
Sam, is there, I assume that there's a number of stories maximum for the uptown area, is that correct?
It's based on the height, not the number of stories. So 48 feet.
Oh, great.
Is there any will among the city to want to increase that?
There is on my part. I've talked to some department heads about possibly doing a citywide feasibility study to raise all the building heights across the entire city as a way to increase our density without increasing our footprint. We haven't started that study, but there are some department heads that are thinking about it, and I remind them every so often. But I know there's other aspects besides housing units. There's public safety, there's water pressure, there's a lot of things to consider. And since COVID hit, we haven't reopened that conversation.
Glenn, do you think that would be a possible incentive?
Well, I mean, of course, but like he said, there's a lot of additional factors that go along with that, mainly utilities. And can we support the extra story?
Yeah.
Would that be, Sam, would that be easier to deal with if you were looking at a property like the 732 property rather than something in the uptown area?
I couldn't say without having a good handle on the water and sewer and police. It's hard to say. I think when you see our Western Knolls report that combined the charrette results with a fiscal impact analysis that Zach put together, we're still tweaking that internally. I think it'll make this kind of conversation will make a lot more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, Sam, that 48 feet, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The 48 feet, is that above grade?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And to Scott's point about the NIMBY issue, when we did the design charrette, I had two people that were in my group who lived in that in that housing development behind 732, and they were very happy with the gradual increase in population, where the area next to the housing that was there would be housing similar to that, and then as you got closer to the road would increase in density. So that's an option too, rather than just you know, green space. Okay, any further comments for Shauna?
Thank you.
Shauna, you had those 3 points, is that correct, at the end?
Yeah, so just what we need
Okay.
in order to proceed. You know, it's one of our goals. It's in fact the number one goal. I know we don't have any relative importance for that, but it is on there. And it really, I think at this point, I've repeated myself as far as some of the information we've talked about in the past. Glenn has some obviously really good ideas in mind about, for instance, a formula for paying, you know, for increased density. So really, we're talking about staff time, city council time, and then feasibility, you know, information about whether these incentives will be, you know, absorbed by the city. Okay.
So who could give that information? Would it all be staff giving it to us, or is there something more that you and Glenn could work on, or that we could help you with?
I think I want Sam or Zach to say what they think and to see, you know, what direction we can go in. I mean, if this is a goal that we need to postpone because of COVID, it seems like to develop this kind of policy is going to take staff time, as far as helping us know what to present ultimately to city council. Then you know, maybe we should get rid of that goal for until 2021 when we know better about what's going on economically. So I just want to hear from staff.
Yeah, I think now that since we have this in writing and you've taken the time to go through it, it's caused me to have some more questions, and I think Zach and I can sit down and go through it and then talk to the other department heads and, you know, see if any of these have merit to spend time on or resources on, or whether they're legal or not legal and that kind of thing. So there's some things in here that I hadn't thought of before. So I think this is a great report.
I'll also say I really appreciate the Bloomington example, because I know one of the concerns that was brought up in past meetings was finding a comparable Midwestern community to compare to. So I really appreciate that example, and I'd like to dive into that a little bit more in detail.
I know I've looked at the fee waivers off and on for the past couple of years, and that's another study that I'd like to do, because we have a lot of fees in a lot of different departments, and that might be a simple way to help recruit a developer just by offering that small token. It's amazing. It's kind of the coupon mentality, you know, for some people. Just every little thing helps.
Okay. And you don't think that would adversely affect revenue for the city?
I can't answer that yet. I've brought it up a couple times, but I haven't really got a reaction from some of the folks that I need to. And now, like you said, it's not the best time to ask. So.
Yeah, that would be my only hesitation, would be that the city income the outgo is higher at this point probably than the income. So we have to worry about that. Okay,
So
thank you.
here's my proposal at the end of this presentation.
Okay.
Just, you know, here I put together some notes. I think report's a strong word, but I put together some notes. I did forward that document link to Zach and Sam. I kind of would love to know if this is something that we could move forward with in 2020, or if it's something we need to wait to be a goal in 2021, because I guess what I would like to stop talking about it, and I would like to either move on it or say, hey, we're going to take a look at this in 2021 as a goal.
Right.
So I would love for the next HAC meeting to be, hey, Sam and Zach, is this something we can actually move on, or do we need to delay it? Because we have these 4 other amazing goals to work on as well.
Point taken. Thank you. And I think we may follow up with you you by yourself, just to give you an idea on what we're seeing before we wait to the next meeting to give you a reaction. Thanks.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Sam, I have an off-topic question, slightly off-topic. Regarding new developments in town, most of those happen to be residential. Do the property management companies, are they in-town companies, as in like, are there FTEs that get generated that provide us tax revenue from their income tax?
Yes.
So, for example, like the Gaslight District, would you be aware that they added additional property managers that may result in additional income, payroll income, like an income tax revenue to the city because that development was built?
I don't know the answer to that. It's being managed by a company that already had several hundred rentals. So I don't know
Okay.
whether that increase was enough to generate more on the payroll or not. I would think it would, but I don't know if it would be an entire FTE or not.
Okay.
Well,
That's
I would
the,
think that it may require some more service staff too, but again, that would probably just be incremental rather than a full-time staff person.
yeah. Uh, just thinking about uh, fee waivers and other, like you said, coupon options. Like I definitely want to see if we can offset those, kind of like TIFs, where you give a major incentive to have a developer come and develop that property, then the property value gets raised. If there's commercial property on there, then jobs get created, and it ends up being a net positive for the city regarding revenue.
And Glenn, to your point, my ZipRecruiter and Indeed job listings have been heavy at this point with additional or replacement housing managers for properties here in Oxford.
Thank you for
Okay.
that.
All right, shall we move on to the housing? Oh, Shauna, were you happy with, had you finished what you wanted to say about?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to item number 5, the housing fund, which I assume is in Sam or Zach's.
Yeah, I can give an update on that. Zach and I spent some time looking at that. It's been probably, well, really just right after the last meeting. And when we listened to all the comments and we started kind of compiling and reviewing all of your goals, and because of COVID, it seemed like the focus was really more toward short-term needs. And the fund balance is so small that our idea was maybe we should look at giving this all to a short-term user that is meeting current needs for rent and utilities, that kind of thing. So we talked to Family Resource Center about that, and Sherry asked for some information on their kind of a quarterly report, what their activities are, what their income and outgoing expenditures are, that kind of thing. And we just got that a few days ago. So we haven't gone any farther with that. And so Sherry hasn't given an opinion, but so kind of seeing how that goes, it might turn out that we actually recommend that to City Council, actually just to give that to FRC. It's $5,800. And kind of reopen the discussion of what Glenn was talking about earlier, having a separate fund for the long-term type of housing project assistance for developers or even for individuals. So that's really all that was. I wasn't going to spend 20 minutes on it, but if you have questions or more ideas, I know we've kind of talked this issue to death, but I think it's still something that our finance director would like to, since there's no revenue coming into this fund, we need to do something with it and kind of restart in the future.
Comments, questions?
I'm very much in favor of doing that as long as the documentation on revenue and expenses meets whomever's approval. I just think they're going to be slammed here in the next few months with expenses for utilities and rent and other things like that.
Yeah, my concern was that I would prefer to have it, if it was donated to FRC, to have it go into them as a line item in their budget for specifically housing needs.
Well, every nonprofit is required, if a donor specifies a restriction, it's unethical and to do anything otherwise. So yes, I would agree with you that that we could ask for a report that would show the actual expenditures that had been made from the fund until it went down to zero.
So Sam, shall we take a vote on having you go ahead and do that?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, we can look at it, and Jason would probably want to recuse himself anyway, but you know, I think there was enough discussion last time, and I think there's enough consensus. I don't think you need to vote again on it, personally.
Okay. Everybody's
But if you
happy?
vote till you can.
I'm not getting any feedback that anybody disagrees with it.
My only question on this is, if we drain the fund entirely and give that to FRC, is it going to be difficult in the future to develop that fund again? Do we have to go through the whole thing like a new ordinance to develop that fund, or?
Yeah, I can answer that. I mean, it would be part of the budget process. That fund wasn't set up properly in the first place. So I think the finance director would be happy to have a properly set up fund, as long as there's a revenue source and a plan for it.
Okay.
Okay, Sam, looks like you've got the green light.
Thanks.
Okay, ongoing items of interest, brief updates. Homeless housing needs, Nicola has not yet shown up, but I have an email from her. I can read it into the minutes. Not a lot has changed since the last time I talked about the homeless. We are still continuing to help clients in order to prevent evictions, which may happen once the courts open up for business. We recently did a rough count of the homeless that came our way in person and phone calls during the last calendar year. The number was between 70 and 80. They include those living in tents, couch surfing, as well as those living in the various hotels. Some of them are local and others travel from different places because they have friends or family here they can temporarily stay with. We've been able to house some, but we haven't heard from others given the transient nature of the homeless population. Last week, a homeless unmarried couple came by asking for help with housing. We are working with them to find something. Neither of them have jobs, and they are not keen to separate and go to a shelter. The shelters also have certain criteria for entry that all homeless do not meet, unfortunately. Okay, so that's Nicola's report. Any comments? Okay, let's go on to fall 2020 rentals, Scott.
Excuse me. Well, needless to say, this is probably not the best time to be asking questions about what's available, what's not available, how many units. This is probably the busiest time for every property management company in town. So I've got it from one Coldwell Banker. We've got 422 units that we rent out. There's 188 homes, and then there's 65 multifamily buildings. And in there are 234 units included inside of those 65 buildings. So the 422, there's 43 student vacancies right now. The difficulty here is they just moved out. There's no way for anyone to tell, is that back on the market now because it didn't get re-rented yet? Did it just come back on, or has it sat empty for the last semester or year? The other thing, okay, and then there's 26 family homes that are not rented. And as scrolling through both of those, I did see there was some repetitiveness. So obviously a single family home might work for a family, but it also would work for students. So they're trying to rent it no matter which way. But there's not a ton of overlap. And the other difficulty is the families don't renew until this July 31st. It's going to be the beginning of June before they start asking the people who are currently in place, do they want to stay there and renew? So I'm thinking, to get a true idea of what's out there and what's left, I think that this should be revisited more around October. The families are in place, mainly because people have kids. They want kids in the school system. The students are going to rent are here, they're locked in. They won't know what's left and what might be available, how to approach some landlords. But until you get past everybody's in where they need to be, you're kind of floating around.
So are your figures from Coldwell Banker on loan or College Property Management in addition?
No, College Property Management.
Okay.
Yeah, they are our rental division.
Okay.
And the others, I ended up leaving messages or I got a chuckle.
I think it will help now that Miami has made the statement that they are definitely having on-campus population in the fall. So
yeah.
Now things should solidify a little better.
Surprising that, I mean, usually we have things already booked up by this time next year, for next year. I'm surprised that there are that many vacancies left. But right now there are. And I don't know how many more may enter the market. Maybe leases go through the end of May and they haven't come back on the active list yet. But then again, they may be signed up for the following year, but nobody there in the summertime. It's so much of an influx thing. It's like pushing a log chain uphill. Just about.
God, I like your idea of checking again in October. That makes a whole lot of sense.
I think that's the best way to do it. Thanks. And I'll be glad to do that.
As an additional detail, and I actually in conversation mentioned this to Scott a couple weeks ago, Miami is doing a huge push to get students to be on campus. They're not sure exactly what's going to happen in the fall. So they seem, from what I see, just in Facebook marketing, and that they're really trying to get people to be on campus this year.
But their requirement is still just the first 2 years of school, right?
Right.
I just mean they are emphasizing the beauty of living on campus. They're definitely looking at juniors and seniors as well.
And all those kids are looking at can't drink in a dorm. Can't have a big party in a dorm. No matter how much you
What dorm were you?
Quiet. Obviously, I never lived in a dorm. But that's the big incentive for people to get off of campus anyway, and that's hard to fight. There's no room for a beer pong table in a dorm. How about that?
That's true.
This kind of overlaps I think I shared information right after the last meeting that had popped up in my records about the other homes, the residential properties that the university owns, and wondering how many of them are occupied or not, and how we may be able to bring those properties into some of our plans for subsidized housing opportunities.
There may be some pushback, I think, from the location of the neighborhood, from what I saw on that list.
Well, and is the university willing to work with us on anything like that?
Sorry, I stepped away there. Did I miss a question?
Yeah, Steve was saying that at the last meeting we discussed university-owned properties and whether we could work with them on having, if they have open properties, on having those open properties have people in them. And I said, is the university willing to work with the city on that?
I've brought it up and haven't gotten any traction. I know there's some houses that are going to be demolished this summer. So I think their business model would have to change quite a bit in physical facilities in order for there to be any changes there.
Are the houses being demolished for them to rebuild or repurpose?
They're so they don't have to maintain them because they don't generate revenue.
Okay. All right, thanks, Sam.
And yet, Scott, you're saying that many of those addresses were in nice areas?
Yeah, there's one, what was it, Shadowy Hills, and one on Bonham, or off of Bonham.
And then, my next door neighbor's house on Brookview Court was a lovely ranch house.
Yeah, I've been in the one
605.
on Shadowy Hills. A friend of mine was renting it for a while when she was here temporarily in the business school. And it's a nice older home, but it's, it's an older home. Maybe it's got issues that the university doesn't want to have to deal with anymore.
They'd probably be better off to just sell it and make it go away. And it would probably best served by a single family.
Yes.
And not into affordable housing situation.
Yeah.
Because that's such a tight little cluster right there.
Yes, it is.
Very tight.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Can we move on to HAC code changes? Sam?
Thank you. Yes, this was delayed because we were only putting emergency or urgent type of things on the council meeting. So I think there was a delay there. And then once it finally did come through, the city manager and mayor didn't get a chance to see it ahead of time because it kind of got lost in the shuffle with COVID. So they wanted to take some more time to look at this. And so it's not on the agenda tomorrow. For city council is what we had planned, but instead they would like to do a work session between city council and HAC in June. We don't have a date on that yet. It could possibly, and then I'll give you this date, but it's not scheduled. It would be potentially June the 9th, which would be, it would not be the same meeting. It would not be the same night as a council meeting.
That would be in time to get on the agenda for the next council meeting. Should it happen that way?
Probably not, because the legislation for the agenda typically closes on the Monday prior because of the different checks and balances it has to go through.
So I imagine you knew that last Tuesday when I reported to Planning Commission it would be before council tomorrow night.
I did not.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I found out Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So both Sherry and I have terms that are ending in June, I believe. Are those being considered for reappointment, or how is that to be handled?
Those, I don't know what date that is. Usually the appointments are all done for the in June. I don't know if it'll be the first meeting or the second meeting. But if you have your application in for reappointment, then it'll all be put in a batch with all of the all of those that have applied so they can do them all at one time.
So I'm just thinking though that if we have this work session on the 9th, and the proposal is to expand the group, well, I guess if there are additional applicants that have not been appointed at the normal time, there's still a batch of them to consider for expansion if they happen to fit the categories that we've suggested, right?
The categories you suggested,
The ones that we've talked about, adding someone with banking experience,
Architecture, for-profit and nonprofit developers.
so I think the work session is a good idea so that we can all communicate it. I guess I'm just a little sorry about the time frame.
Yeah, because it's, once the work session would happen, it wouldn't get on the next meeting agenda, and it has to be through 2 meeting agendas before it would be approved. So nothing would happen until August. Is that correct?
yeah, so the soonest, if it went on the agenda right after the work session, if the work session happened June 9th, it wouldn't be on until the first meeting in July, which would be the 7th for first reading, and then the 21st for second reading. And then it would be in effect 30 days after, which would be August 21st. So that'd be the quickest schedule.
And then what is the procedure to fill those? Do we wait till, I mean, are the terms in quarterly appointments and we would wait till September, or are they in half-yearly appointments and we would wait till December?
I don't know the answer to that. If you could do it starting right away, you probably could. They're normally cycled over at the July 1st. So if it went into effect, a month or 2 into that, it would be basically a partial term. It'd be
and that's how I was appointed originally. And I think I also was appointed into the Student Community Relations Commission that same way. So I would imagine that if there's an applicant and a vacancy, that council can act.
I don't know if we need everybody, but June 9th, June, I will not be available. So you guys count me out.
Okay. We will miss you.
I'll be back.
Good. All right. Let's hope that Nicola can come. That would be good. All right. So Sam, you'll let us know when this meeting is going to take place?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Western Knolls. Sam?
I mentioned this earlier. Zach, is there anything you want to add?
No. Like Sam said, we've been working on the publication, and it's nearing completion. We're just circulating it for some comments. We reached out to our participating design professionals for comments, but that should be wrapping up hopefully pretty soon.
Okay, yeah, that was one of the old business points I was going to bring up because it was mentioned last month that it would be in the next couple of weeks, and so I guess that did not happen, correct? Okay.
As far as having a complete draft, that did happen, but it hasn't been officially wrapped up yet.
Okay, thank you.
But we do have a complete draft.
Great. Okay, cottage community.
We have nothing to report.
Okay. Progress on the housing study.
We do have a contract with Bowen National Research, and we're doing emails on a daily basis with data that they're collecting. So that's exciting that it's underway. I know that they're working on getting some MLS data for real estate transactions and just really working with us on establishing the primary and secondary market areas, the geography for those. So yeah, we're excited where it's going. It's a really, really reputable, highly qualified firm.
Excellent. Okay, old business. Going to be referring to the minutes of the April 2020 meeting. In the paragraph on the first page that started, Sam shared an update. In about mid-paragraph down, it says Sam asked whether the commission wanted more direct involvement or if the staff would continue coordinating primarily with Sherry on the study. General consensus was expressed in the latter. I have not received any kind of connection. Is there anything that I'm supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be looking at things? And what is your concept of my involvement with the study?
We haven't seen anything being produced yet. So
You would be waiting for the production rather than
yeah,
any kind of ongoing meetings? Okay,
correct.
okay,
Once we start seeing something from them, then we will start involving you.
okay. All right. The on page 2, the first full paragraph, this brings up the point that Steve commented that SCRC had discussed students abandoning buildings in their units, belongings in their units. And then it goes on to discuss other things that Steve was discussing. The next paragraph begins, Sherry asked whether Steve could reach out to the county on behalf of the commission. Steve, do you recall that conversation?
I recall now.
Would you?
And I was working an issue in behalf of Oxford seniors with Desmond Mehta, so I didn't do anything on that side other than the fact that they are going to be getting a substantial amount of additional CDBG funds, and of course several of us participated on the CDBG plan with the outside consultants. But I was not successful yet in connecting with Commissioner Carpenter, with whom I'd hoped to speak about her perceptions of the usefulness of the tiny homes project in Oxford.
Okay, so that would you be able to have time? I know things are crazy, but would you be able to have time in the next month to be able to do that?
I will try to leave a message for her this afternoon.
It's the only thing we can ask.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also in the next paragraph down toward the bottom, about 5 rows from the bottom, this is the 2020 goals. Steve also suggested we could look into another nonprofit in the county that could take over responsibility. Sam suggested the previous proposal last year to council for moving funding over to the community foundation could simply be reintroduced with a greater relevance due to insecurity caused by COVID-19. Has this all been taken care of with our motion to move the money out of that account?
Yes, yes, it has.
Excellent. All right. Okay, anything else? Anybody have any other old business, new business?
One piece of, well, it isn't new business, but it's information. I hope you can see this. Oh, the Rural Livability Guide. I found a very interesting segment on housing that I'm scanning and I'll be emailing to all of you
Wonderful.
shortly. And I think there's some interesting points to consider.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Okay, I will.
Second that.
Okay, thanks, Shauna. Thank you, Steve. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, for your input. Have a safe month,
you.
week.